What we're asking of the Republicans right now is to keep the government open at funding levels that Democrats think are very harmful to the economy and inadequate to make sure that the economy is growing faster, more people are put back to work, and the middle class is growing. We're willing to pass at least a short-term budget that opens up the government at current funding levels. It doesn't even address the harm that's been done because of sequestration.
We can't raise the debt ceiling without doing something about what's driving us to borrow more money and to live beyond our means. The idea that we should continue to spend money that we don't have and give the bill to our kids and our grandkids would be wrong.
Well, that was today as the president and the speaker talking about their respective positions here regarding both the shutdown and the looming debt limit crisis. And you heard from the president say he might be willing to agree to a shorter term budget if it means opening the government and addressing the debt limit here. But the president reiterated his stance that he would not negotiate on the budget as long as the government's doors were shut. Who's right and who's wrong here? Let's bring in our panel on this. Richard Brodsky, former New York State Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos and professor at NYU. Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author. Chris Shays, former Connecticut congressman and distinguished fellow in public service at the University of New Haven. Mark Furnish, professor at Brooklyn Law and attorney who has argued before the High Court, and they had a busy day today. We'll talk about that shortly as well. And Andrew Whitman, who you've met already, our senior political correspondent. Okay, Congressman, I spoke to one of your former colleagues, and seems to be common consensus there was no sign of optimism today, but yet one more day off the calendar as we get closer to October 17th. Should the public be worried here that this impasse isn't just posturing? We could be getting pretty close here to the debt limit.
The public has reason to be worried about a lot of things.
Oh,
yeah. A potential government shutdown that could go on for a while, not increasing the national debt, but they are inaccurate about stating that it means we default on our bonds and so on. Our interest is 10% of the budget. It's about whether we continue to spend more and more money. John Boehner's right about that. So if the debate could be about let's get spending under control, let's grow the economy, it would be very positive.
What about Obamacare? All you guys, your former guys, seem to care about is stopping Obamacare. Yeah. Why doesn't somebody in the Republican rank and file stand up and say that instead of saying we got to stop Obamacare?
They should.
Boy, let's move on to the next subject immediately.
We can solve so many problems on the panel tonight.
well, let's get to the elephant in the room, which
people
is
like him are an endangered species in Washington.
Well, no, there is some irony. If I could,
yes,
the Democrats wiped out all the moderates in the middle that were the bridge between both sides.
Okay.
The Republicans knocked out all the blue dog Democrats who were in the middle, who were the bridge.
The Democrats knocked out the Republicans?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about them shooting a circular firing squad and shooting them?
That's another issue. The bottom line is you do not have people in the middle of the political spectrum in Washington bringing people together.
There were a few scary comments, though, more than the political posturing, when we talk about the debt limit. I haven't met or heard one economist. Now we heard from folks from the IMF on the international front. There seems to be consensus that, wait a minute here. Forget about, you only have to go back to 2011 to remember the last time we did the dance around the debt limit when we got near it. Look what happened to the markets here. Look what happened to our national credit rating. But some of your former colleagues are saying, you know what, it wouldn't be that bad. One went so far as to say it would be a good thing. There's one thing with staking out political positions, but when people that are playing with fire say, give me more gas, now this becomes about a national security issue.
You scare me, they don't. Because I honestly don't think you're being accurate. Increasing the national debt is not about defaulting on debt. The debt is 10% of the budget. Increasing the national debt means you can spend more and more and more. And that's one reason why our interest rates on our budget are going to keep going up
What
and up.
about perception throughout the world?
Perception is partly a problem because we have inaccurate descriptions of what's happening.
But
Let's
the,
talk.
the effective result of not increasing the debt limit would be that we have to decide which bills we pay, which we
comes
don't.
down to prioritization.
And we would have to default on some of the obligations that we have, whether it's to individual Americans or whether it's to bondholders.
Oh, I agree that Social Security is in jeopardy, and that will be incredibly harmful. But at least let's talk about what's at stake here and what's not. Our debt that is owed to people around the world and to Americans is not in jeopardy.
But we're, with all due respect, we're focusing on the wrong thing. Nobody in this room, no one in Washington can control the outcome the closer we get to the 17th because the markets will decide for us. If the markets decide that, wait a second, the U.S. isn't a good bet. Look what the Chinese said today. Look what the Japanese said today. Then all of a sudden, we're going to see Wall Street speak with
I
their...
can answer your question. The President of the United States has the ability to make sure that we do not default on any debt, whether or not we increase the national debt. The thing, just an example of the absurdity going on. So our veterans couldn't visit the World War Memorial, the World War II Memorial. That is a passageway from the Washington Monument to the Lincoln Memorial. We literally had to pay someone to prevent people from going and walking by the memorial.
Congressman, due respect, we don't allow people to walk through the memorial during the middle of the night. There are hours when it's closed, when there is a staff there to make sure that it's operated and that it's not being defaced.
I live there. I know this to be true or not. I can run right by it.
I understand that, but it's closed the same way it would be closed during the middle of the night.
We closed the
But the
Lincoln
symbolic
Memorial.
value of it is disgusting. I mean, we look terrible on the world stage. We look like a bunch of clowns. We look like Rex Ryan's Jets from last year.
Stop that. Don't be making fun
From
of the Jets.
last
Now
year.
that, thank you. But wait, forget about the optics. Today you had literally death benefits that aren't going out to families, okay? And if the answer is, for soldiers, excuse me, and their families, if the answer is, well, wait a second, we'll pass basically an appropriation to pay for that, and we keep doing this on an ad hoc basis, that's not a way to run a candy store, let alone a government.
We can have an honest debate about that. That's an honest debate, and I agree with you. It's not an honest debate to say we're going to default on our debt, because we are simply not going to do it.
Chris, that means that you've decided that paying the interest to bondholders is more important than paying Social Security. Now, there are reasons for that, but that's not the way of the world. Someone's going to get hurt. If you want to say debt's more important than Social Security, fine. I may not say that. But let's remember, this is not a fight between us. We could work something out at this table. What this fight's supposed to be about is the Republican House's insistence on ending Obamacare. That word hasn't come up once at this table. If your guys will abandon that and start doing what I think John Boehner wants, which is a legacy where he actually control out-year entitlement spending.
Which we need to do.
Well, I think everybody agrees with that.
No,
but to get to that, you got to get past this. No president of the United States can negotiate with a gun to his head on an issue like this, because if he does it now, he'll have to do it again in 6 weeks the next time it expires. It's not going to happen.
He's been very willing to negotiate on the foreign stage with no preconditions attached to anything, but here he's taking a hard line. There's some sort of incongruity in that position, don't you think?
Because there's a process by which legislation is dealt with. If you surrender to blackmail and extortion, you'll have to surrender again.
I actually agree with you, but I would like to see that more of that resolve shown on the world stage, particularly what just happened with Syria.
We didn't have an election with Syria. We didn't have an election with Russia. We had an election. Democrats and Republicans had an election, and there were results to that election.
Well, to Andrew's point that he makes here, to me, I hope that this thing's going to resolve and cooler heads will prevail and some sanity will happen before the 17th or the 22nd, whatever the key number is. The real date is right. But for me, what's the object lesson that people take away from this? Elections don't matter anymore. Tyranny of the minority. You can run up a debt here, but we'll decide whether or not we do or don't want to pay, or which bills we're going to pay.
Well, okay, so
it's not what I think. The real debates, they should be on the margins. We're having a debate about the main, about what the role of government is, who gets to decide.
So wouldn't it be healthy that we have the same kind of logical debate and we don't talk in extreme manner that certain things are going to happen or simply not going to happen? It's valid to say Social Security wouldn't get paid. That's valid. It is not valid to say that that our debt will not be
I
paid.
believe it's
We've
up on the
never
table.
reneged on our
Fair
debt,
enough.
and we never will.
But I believe it's up on the table that nobody at this table knows how bad it could get in the financial markets and the impact it's going to have on all the adjustable rate loans everybody at this table may or may not have on a variety of things in their lives. And that uncertainty that we all know, the volatility index is the dirtiest words to anybody in the markets. We're might as well put the thing on steroids. And that to me is the part, it's all self-inflicted.
Let's see if we can get a way out. What's the pathway out of this? First thing is, Republicans have to unequivocally back off the linkage between the debt ceiling and Obamacare.
And I think they have.
Oh,
Certainly not.
Certainly not. But wait a minute.
Well,
I'm making some progress here. Don't interrupt me. The second thing that has to happen is Obama has to be willing to engage Boehner and others in a discussion about entitlement reform.
Tom, I'm going to let you finish. What is when and how does that take place? After they agree to open the government and take that limit off the table?
Third thing is that the sequestration cuts, which are not long-term deficit related, have to be back on the table. All three parties have to get together. That can start in days, Richard.
But wait, after there has been, from the GOP side, as the president has insisted.
You cannot expect people to walk up to you and say, do it my way, and the other side cannot in a democracy say, oh, okay, please, I'll talk to you about it. You have to say no.
But you have a date staring. You think you're going to get all this done before the 22nd or the 17th?
The government of the United States cannot function if an 80-member caucus of the minority of one party
I'm agreeing with
can
you.
hold up the government and the president of the United States surrenders to it. Can't happen.
You know, as an everyman who's sort of a political novice compared to the distinguished guests here, I think it's going to end when people demand that it ends. This doesn't feel real to the body politic in general. It's like playing with Monopoly money.
Once a 401k gets screwed,
once it hits you in the wallet, people will be galvanized, they'll get angry, there'll be a groundswell of rage, and it'll be fixed. Right now, this is just a joke. It's posturing. It doesn't feel real.
well,
If the government opens without a real commitment to deal with the very things you say, then this will be bad news for everyone.
Then let's have John Boehner say to the president, if I open the government and I pay the debts, will you sit down and have a real conversation? In public. Let him say that to the president. Let's see what the president says.
Yeah, see, the president, it doesn't have to act like he's given it everything. He just needs to say, yeah, these things are on the table, but after the government opens.
all right. I mentioned
I agree.
steroids. Well, we have a case that many people say is a familiar decision, except on steroids. Citizens United once again in the spotlight at the High Court today. Focus on campaign finance. They're taking up a case that could let campaign cash flow even more freely than ever before. Is it good or bad for democracy? We'll talk about that at the table.